And what we're going to start with is stand-up maths. So this is very important because I myself read a bunch of articles on how this equation is dumb and how Donald Trump's math is dumb. It's not even math. It's not real. It doesn't equate to anything. But more importantly, this guy is not American, okay? I think he's from New Zealand. He has no reason, no bias. He has no reason other than the fact that he gives a shit about math to go over this equation for you guys. So I found this video because I thought it was a good video. I have watched this video. I usually don't watch videos, but I watched this video, and I wanted to share this with you guys because it does a really good job of explaining things that I would have a hard time explaining. So I want to watch this video with you guys. So let's check out this guy. Let's watch this video, and we'll have some analysis. We'll talk about some of the things that I noticed about this equation to start with. First, I don't think he brings this up. But the fact that they use Greek symbols to like church this up, to be like, oh, this is like high level math. You guys don't even know. You guys don't even know how smart we are over here in the White House. Okay? Like we're the smartest people. We use Greek symbols. We're gonna get to the fucking use of asterisks in the equation, which is fucking amazing. But we'll get to that in a second. Let's watch a little bit of the video. And yeah, you guys pay attention. Pay attention to what this man says, because he really breaks this shit down good.
This equation, derived and published by the Trump administration, combined with their own numbers, nothing to do with me or anyone else, predicts that there will be over 10% inflation on all goods imported into the U.S.
And he's going to break that down and show how that happens. But just so you know, that's like a baseline. The baseline that they predicted with their own math was that, and this is with saying that only a quarter of the tariff would be passed through the customer, which is ridiculous. But with their own math, claiming that a quarter of the tariff would be passed through the customer, we would see at least, as a baseline, 10% inflation on all goods. And of course, those numbers change depending on how high the tariffs are.
US as paid by US consumers. Their numbers, their equation. Let me explain.
I'd like to see the chart if you have it. I think you can, for the most part, see it. Those with good eyes, with bad eyes. Thanks a lot, Eric. I think you better take it with you. It's not going to last very long.
2 days ago, Trump had a big press event to celebrate Liberation Day where he waved around some physical spreadsheets, which obviously caught my eye. And watching the footage, I'm like, it looks like the second column is just half the first column, but with a floor of 10%. So of course I went and found them online, put them into an actual spreadsheet, put in a formula, and yes, the second column is just half the first column, but with a minimum
pay attention bucket
10%. I was like, that's interesting. I didn't put any further thought into where those equations come from. I'd satisfied my curiosity for the time.
As soon as I started playing math,
the Trump
she was like, I'm out of here.
They know how to get me. They released an equation. They're like, this is the equation of where those percentages came from. And I was like, okay, fine, I'll do it. So I had a closer look at the equation, and I'm now qualified to talk you through it. This equation does indeed calculate all the values in that first column of the spreadsheet Trump was waving around, which means it represents the tariffs charged to the USA, and I quote...
And see, this is what I'm saying. When I say that, when you talk to Trump supporters now, these are going to be their facts, right? Their facts from this point on is going to be 67%, 39%. We were being tariffed 84%. Because they're not going to know anything about the numbers that were shown to them. They're just going to say what they saw and believe that it's correct. And he's about to show you why that is all bullshit.
Including currency manipulation and trade barriers.
Can I turn up the volume a little bit? I don't think so. I think that's as loud as he is. He's got kind of a... Here, let's see. What about back here? Maybe this button? That's as high as that goes. He's a little bit low. I'll just not talk. How about that? Here, let's try this. Because you know what's going to happen is I'm going to turn him up, and we're going to go to the next video, and it's going to be like through the goddamn roof. Let's try this. How about that? How about that? Tell me if that's better.
Except it doesn't. That's not what that is. This is not calculating the tariffs other countries are charging the US. This is calculating the tariffs the US would have to charge other countries in order to get trade balance. For example, last year, Australia bought from the US $34.6 billion worth of stuff. And that's US dollars, not the local dollary-doos.
Here. Is there no closed captioning? I can't put CC on? I can't even do closed captioning. Wow. We got to talk to this guy about his video production.
At the same time, the US only bought $16.7 billion worth of things from Australia. So from the US's point of view, Australia gave them more money than the US gave Australia, to the tune of a $17.6 billion trade surplus. And surplus sounds positive. It just means Australia bought more things from the US than it sold. Now, New Zealand is the other way around. Very similar country, I would say. Not everyone would. And Australia bought from the US $4.5 billion worth of things last year. The US, however, bought $5.5 billion worth of things from New Zealand. So that means the US is running a £1.1 billion deficit.
Just so you guys know, this is about the time that Trump supporters are like, what? Fuck this. I'm going to go watch wrestling. Jenny, $20. Thank you, Jenny. Thank you so much. $20. I'm like a really ugly stripper up here. A bald, hairy, not good at dancing stripper up here. Thank you for the $20. Thank you so much.
Trade deficit, which sounds bad, just means the US bought a lot of, I don't know, New Zealand wine. But let's just say hypothetically it was bad,
Marlboro.
And the US wanted to balance out its trade with New Zealand. It would need to reduce the amount it imports from New Zealand by 19.6% to get back down to parity. And that is what this equation tells you. On the left-hand side, that triangle is the delta that represents the amount of change. The tau, the T-looking thing, represents tariffs, and the I just means for one specific country. Country I. So, for example,
so it's changed the tariff in
for now.
country.
So this means the formula is calculating the change in tariffs the US would have to charge country I, New Zealand. And that is to achieve trade balance. On the right-hand side, we work that out. X is the amount the US is exporting to that country. M is the amount it's importing from that country. So the difference is the trade imbalance, although wrong way around. Get to that in a moment.
Yeah.
Underneath is where it gets fun. M is still the imports, but epsilon, the E thing, that represents the elasticity of demand for the imports going into the US.
So in other words, when you have inflation, you tend to have less demand, right? And when you have, or more demand, sorry. When you have inflation, you have more demand. So the easiest way to explain inflation is too much money chasing too little product, right? And deflation would be the opposite. It would be too little money chasing too much product. So that's how, like the easiest way to explain inflation. Like a lot of people don't understand what inflation is. And inflation, the reason you had inflation during COVID was because we had all the stimulus money. That's on purpose. You're actually trying to inflate the economy because you want it to run hot. You want people to be purchasing products because then that keeps people employed and also keeps us exporting product, right? So when he talks about elasticity just means which way it goes, whether or not the demand goes higher or lower, how far in that spectrum it comes back and forth, like a rubber band. Gnome Dome, $10. Wrap that beard around the stripper pole. I think it'll make at least twice. I could get it around twice, I bet. Let's see. Fan says, that the only reason they use a derivative like that equation is to obscure the truth and make it look like they know more than you do. Yeah, of course. Like that's what I'm saying is they don't need to use any of these symbols, right? Like they could have just explained this formula in a very like simplistic manner, which would have appealed to Trump supporters, right? But they don't, because instead this is the party of symbolism over substance. So, as always, they prefer shock and awe to ever any kind of substance. So, instead of like learning any of this business about inflation or about how tariffs work or how, inflation would actually increase under tariffs, they don't want to learn any of those things. That's way too much work for them. What they want to learn is things are going to be better for us. Well, I've got news for you. If you are a middle class or lower middle class person that voted for Donald Trump, things are not going to get better for you. It doesn't matter whether it's over the next 2 years or over the next 10 years. The most likely thing that's going to happen, because you love symbolism so fucking much, is that you're going to, for the next 2 years, struggle your fucking ass off, and then they're going to give you stimulus checks, which is something that they would do anyways anytime that you went into a recession, because stimulus has been proven to help get us out of recessions or to avoid recessions, which we were doing until, like last week. But if you think that this whole plan by Donald Trump to level out and make trading more fair throughout the globe is somehow going to benefit you as a middle-class person, because it's going to drive down the price of groceries, or it's going to drive down the price of gas or the price of eggs. No. The way we drive down the price of eggs is by getting out of the avian flu. Once we're out of the avian flu, we will have lower egg prices. The way that we get to cheaper gas is going to be by solving the issue in Russia and Ukraine. The way that we have cheaper groceries is going to be by creating a surplus of antitrust lawsuits, an excess, I would say, maybe not surplus. I'm using surplus because of this video. An excess of antitrust fucking litigation against price gouging grocery stores. Because here's the thing. Once they get you to pay $5 for gasoline, when it goes down to $3.50, you're like, holy shit, it's so much cheaper now. But it's never going to be $2 again, because they've gotten you to pay $5, and they know that your reaction to only paying $3.50 is, wow, this is so much better. So the same thing goes. Like with eggs. This time last year, eggs were, I think it was about $2.15 a dozen, right? So now what you have is Trump supporters going, no, the price on eggs is coming down. The price on eggs, still on average, is over $4.50 a dozen. So they've got you. They've got you to the point where you're now saying to yourself, $4.50 isn't that much for eggs. They used to be 10. And that's the same thing that's going to happen with groceries. Here's another thing that people don't realize. Do you think that shrinkflation is all of a sudden going to do the opposite? Do you think all of those boxes of Cheez-Its and jars of salsa and bags of chips that they took from 5 ounces to 3.5 so that way they didn't have to change the price, so that way you thought you didn't get a price increase? Do you think that all of a sudden those bags and boxes are going to get bigger again? Do you think that the prices on those products are actually going to go down? No, they're not, because they've already gotten you used to it. So the way that you deal with elevated grocery prices is by creating watchdog committees like the one that Elizabeth Warren was a part of, where you go in to these grocery stores like Kroger's, who wants to use AI fucking face recognition, who readily admitted through an executive that they were price gouging people on eggs during COVID. If you don't believe me, look this shit up. I'm not afraid. Go look it up. The way you deal with grocery stores charging insane prices is by having watchdog committees that go in and make sure that people aren't being price gouged during times of crisis. That's how you do it. It has nothing to do with Donald Trump and his trade war. That enriches Donald Trump and his rich-ass friends. It does not help you. You will be in the same place you are now 10 years from now. And it doesn't matter what the fuck Donald Trump... If Donald Trump is wildly fucking successful, if he literally turns every country in this fucking world into the vassals of America, which is what he wants to do. Don't get it wrong. That's what he wants to do. The reason he's abusing his trade partners is because he does not see them as equals. He wants them to be vassals of America. even if he succeeds in that, you don't benefit. You get one more loaf of bread. You get one more tank of gas, but you don't get to be wealthy. So keep that shit in fucking mind. All right, let's go back. Because this is amazing.
Importing to that country. M is the amount it's importing from that country. So the difference is the trade imbalance, although wrong way around. Get to that in a moment. Underneath is where it gets fun. M is still the imports, but epsilon, the E thing, that represents
I like talking about
the
groceries.
elasticity
I know a lot about groceries.
of demand for the imports going
One
into
thing
the
I know
US.
a lot about.
And the phi symbol, that represents the price
So here you go.
pass-through.
And he's going to get to this in a second. Remember, Trump told you people don't pay for tariffs. Other countries do. But they literally have a price pass-through symbol in the equation. They are looking to how much the price pass-through is going to cost customers, while at the same time telling you that customers don't pay the prices. That's fucking insane. $5. Fantradeath, thank you so much. We're never getting rid of the bird flu. They shut down the CDC. Things like smallpox are sitting in former CDC labs with no oversights. Fan, dude. Oh my God, fan. That is very spot on. As far as the avian flu goes, it was never going to go away. Like, that's the thing that people don't get, is the reason that vaccines are such a great thing is because we build up herd immunity, which makes us less likely to contract the virus because the majority of people in our society are less likely to contract the virus. Obviously, vaccines are never 100% effective. It's about herd immunity. And in 2000, we didn't have measles anymore. Now they're back. Thanks, guys. That's great. Fucking freedom freckles right around the corner. When it comes to the avian flu, as I did that interview with Ronald Grunner, we went over the history of viruses and how all of these viruses come from a singular place and how they've mutated and became new viruses as they make their way into different pigs, birds, cows, just camels. If you guys don't know about MERS, M-E-R-S, that's the Middle East Respiratory Virus Syndrome. But it's in the Middle East and it gets into camels. In fact, at one point or another, the Middle Easterners were told to stay away from their camels because the camels could have the virus and not to come in close contact with their mouths. And in response to that, they took Instagram photos of themselves kissing the camels, and something like 1,600 people have died over the last decade from that disease because of dumb shit like that. Yeah, we really don't actually deserve to live at this point. Like, we can't help ourselves. But good point, fan. That's actually a really good point, fan. All that stuff being left alone with nobody to watch. When I brought this up to my boss today, I like to have these conversations with my boss, and I was like, have you seen the equation? And I'm like, who the fuck wrote that? And he's like, there's nobody. He's like, they fired everybody, dude. There's nobody. And he's right. No one wrote this shit. This was probably produced by ChatGPT. Big Balls probably put in how to balance the trade deficit with the rest of the world for America, and ChatGPT, or probably actually Grok probably said, here you go, bro. Thanks, Big Balls.
Of tariffs. That's a ratio of how much of the costs are passed on. Okay, so we'll break it down with an example. Let's say the US is importing a bottle of wine from New Zealand that would normally sell for, I don't know, $100. And the reason it's $100 is tariffs are currently 0%, that's our baseline, and demand is 100%. But then tariffs go up by down to tau, let's just say 20% for argument's sake. How much is that going to change the price? Well, that depends how much of this increase passes through to the customer. That was our symbol phi from before, some ratio. Let's say hypothetically it's a quarter, so prices go up by 5%. What's going to happen over here with demand? What's that going to be? Well, that depends how elastic demand is. That was our epsilon from before. And we could say hypothetically demand is 4 times whatever the percentage price change is. This does, of course, assume the elasticity of demand is linear.
And this is very important what he's doing here, because when it comes to price increases inside of a grocery store, we do this on like an item by item basis, right? Like the idea that you would ever just universally raise prices is a horrifically bad idea, specifically when you're talking about by percentage. Because when you raise a price by percentage, 1% on $1 is a lot different than 1% on $10 or on $100. Therefore, you could have, say, a 10% increase on everything in your store. So your dollar product goes to $1.09. You round to the 9. So you go to $1.09. Okay, not a big deal. Probably not going to impact demand. However, on a $100 bottle of wine, now it's $110. That's a much bigger difference and will most likely impact demand in a much different way. That's why, like I said before at the beginning of the show, Trump and the way that they went about these tariffs makes absolutely no fucking sense at all. Because the amount of work that you would have to do to tariff an entire globe and do it in a consistent and productive manner would take fucking forever. It's something that you work on as a government very slowly, one country at a time. I've said this before. If you want to tariff things and you want to increase the production of certain industry here in America, then you do it one thing at a time. You say to yourself, oh, you know what? It seems like the automobile industry in America is doing poorly. How can we help them through tariffs? And then you figure out how to appropriately do that after doing long amounts of research and study and then applying it in a very positive manner. Sorry. We got 2. Thank you for the $20, 5 Alarm Fire. I heard this, so I take no credit. MAGA cannot afford to own the libs. Now they can only rent them. Oh, you can't have my... Maybe I should start selling my liberal tears. That's not a bad idea. Ooh. Okay, don't steal that idea from me. I mean, it was kind of partially your idea. I'm thinking bottle the liberal tears and sell them to the MAGA. I bet they'll buy them. Thank you for the $5, fan. Bird flu keeps coming back because it's endemic in the birds. When they feed the pigs, the birds crap in the feed troughs and the pigs catch it. It's also because wild birds, so no matter how much MAGA tells you wild birds don't get avian flu, they're regarded. Well regarded, okay? Because wild birds, when they fly over the coops of the chickens, also shit on the chicken's coops and also spread the virus that way as well. It's the same reason that farmers have realized that they can get sick by tromping through the shit and then tracking it into their homes. This is like, it's just too much. It's like all this shit, like it's all too much for them to fucking understand. It's too many words. It's too many numbers. It's like everything that they want to believe has to be reduced down into bite-sized chicken fucking nuggets, or else it's just not real. Like their brain can't wrap around it. Anyways, what up, Redonk? What's happening? The Mango Menace doesn't care about your math. I know that. I'm well aware. All right, back to the math.
I look B. Well, that depends how elastic demand is.
And somewhere out there right now, there's some fucking MAGA dude watching this video right now being like, this guy doesn't, what does he know about prices of wine? Yeah, I literally buy wine as one of my jobs. So I know a little bit about, I know a little bit about grocery prices and tariffs. I've got 20 years working in the grocery industry, but I'm sure there's some fucking dipshit out there right now that's watching this going, this guy doesn't know anything about it. I watched a YouTube video. I watched a video about it, said Trump was smart. Trump's doing it. He's playing 5D chess. 5D chess. Does this guy know? God damn, sorry. I'm changing the voice.
That was our epsilon from before. And we could say hypothetically demand is 4 times whatever the percentage price change is. This does of course assume the elasticity of demand is linear. I looked up a much more complicated model from a research paper. There's your demand curve, and you got 2 different supply curves because there's what.
So take a look at this graph he's got here, right? This is the type of like mental math you're doing when you're determining where you're going to put a product in a store, what shelf you're going to put it in, whether or not it's a product that's still favorable, or if it's a product the reason its sales have dipped is because it's out of favor, right? Like, just placing a product in a grocery store, I do more math, more research, I do more thinking about what I'm going to do with that product than Donald Trump did to tariff the entire goddamn globe. That's how dumb this is. God damn it.
The manufacturer actually getting, and then there's
peanut.
What the consumer's
We used
seeing
to have a
because
girl
of the
that
extra
called it
tariff.
peanut nar.
How we move to this point over here, and you can say it's linear, but what they've done is a bit of a oversimplification, and that's going to be a theme. But we should now just remind ourselves what we're trying to do. If you take all of your imports and subtract your exports,
I'll see what I can do about that.
That's your trade deficit.
I messed up on the clip
If you divide
channel,
that by
so
the
I
imports,
need to
that's the
create a
percentage
new clip
imports
channel.
have to go down. This
screwed that up.
is the reduction in demand required. Oh, and that's what we've just worked out here. So there's our equation. And if you move the fine epsilon under here, rearrange it like that, this is exactly what the Trump administration were using. But of course, it's much more complicated than that. The diagram I showed you before is actually from a paper that looked at what happened after Trump's 2018 tariffs. Joint publication between the Federal Reserve Bank of New York and University's Princeton.
And if you don't remember, one of the tariffs that he ran was Whirlpool washers, right? So Whirlpool, I want to say it's Whirlpool. I could be wrong about who it was that went to him, but an American manufacturer went to Trump and said, here's $15 billion, make the tariffs go up on other people. That's made up, but I bet it's probably pretty close. So anyways, he decided, okay, we'll tariff these washing machines that are coming from like Samsung and places in Japan, right? So, in South Korea, because South Korea is really big on all that stuff, right? So he increases the prices of washers. So this is one of the places when people say things like, oh, well, the tariffs are only going to be on this, so that's going to go up and other things aren't. That's not how tariffs work. That's not how pricing works. That's not how business works. When those washers went up in price, as they did go up in price, the dryers that are generally sold along with them, even though they're not tariffed, went up in price as well because they know most people buy washers and dryers at the same time. So once again, these corporations recognize that when tariffs like this happen, so think about this. He puts tariffs on, let's say, Vietnam. Let's say the tariffs on Vietnam stay. So footwear coming from Vietnam goes up by 46%. Other companies will raise their prices by 30 to 35% because the new cost for that pair of shoes that they can charge somebody will be just under whatever the Vietnamese. So if you're getting Nikes from Vietnam and you're paying $150, right? And it goes up by 46%. So somewhere $195. Let's just say $195. That's not how much it is, but let's just say it goes up to $195. And then you have Reeboks that at the time that Nikes were $150, they were $130. More likely than not always, but more likely than not, those Reebok shoes will now be $160, $170. Why? Because it's price competitive. Because you will see the $200 pair of Nikes go, holy shit, those tariffs on Vietnam have really changed the price of those Nikes. And then you'll look at the Reeboks and you won't know where the fuck those Reeboks came from. So you'll be like, oh, I guess the price went up on those as well, bro. This is how the middle class stays poor. This is how the wealth gap continues to widen. By fucking billionaires playing games just like Donald Trump is playing right now to enrich him and his buddies and leave you down on the bottom working in fucking factories.
And Colombia. And this is the kind of detail you want to go into when you're bringing in tariffs. Look at this analysis. It's factoring in other things like how the price is going to change relative to demand. It's looking at possible
this is a type of
tariffs
information
that come in.
you
Like,
need.
This is what you should be doing
for one fucking
when you're
thing.
planning tariffs to impact your economy. This level of detail. And we know they didn't put in that detail because on the Office of the United States Trade Representative page, they give all their working out and logic behind it. And there is our equation. And there is none of the detail we would like to see for something this complicated.
It's one page compared to a fucking
that actually
pamphlet.
It would be very complex. I mean, if not impossible to do exactly, and that's true.
Yeah, I agree with that.
But they just
with the insider trading,
they just don't bother.
Yeah.
They just decide to proxy it by
Thanks, Mac.
this equation. Now, I've seen the discussion online that maybe this was generated by ChatGPT or something like that. I can't comment on that.
I have a video on that if you'd like to watch it.
The economics behind it, but I can talk about the maths of the equation. For a start, the M and X are the wrong way around. You should be subtracting.
Yeah. So just to fucking begin with, the very first part of their equation is incorrect. And I can tell you this. So when I'm running labor numbers, right? So I'm plugging in net sales versus labor dollars, right, to get a percentage of labor. If I do that equation and I do the one that's wrong before the one that's right, that should be first, I will come out with like a 77%, right? I immediately know there's something wrong with my math because I see the equation. It's obvious I'm not running a 77% labor. So immediately I go, oh, shit. I inverted those two. I need to put one on the other side of the other. Then it goes down. Okay, now I'm somewhere between 10 and 13%. All right, I feel good about what I'm doing. But I know that because I run the equations. I check them. They did not check this? The government of the United States? The fucking global superpower that drops nuclear bombs on people? Didn't check to see if the equation actually works? No, of course they didn't.
Exports from imports. So this, I mean, it's just technically a negative coefficient they've put in there, but also at the same time, they've said epsilon is less than 0, which mathematically is very funny because epsilon normally means something else. But in this context, maybe that means demand goes down when prices go up, and so that would kind of cancel that. It's just all very odd. And there's one more thing that really bugs me.
Hey, Editor Matt, can you crop me down and move me right over?
By the way, later they claim that epsilon
right
equals 4.
Excellent. There's these.
So they're fucking wrong about their own math.
So here's the thing about an asterisk in mathematical notation. It's not how you would write multiplication. I mean, we understand it to mean multiplication, but that's because sometimes if you're using a keyboard or a number pad or something that hasn't got a multiplication sign, you use the asterisk as like a replacement to mean multiply. So actually in Excel, you'll use an asterisk to represent multiplication, but it's only really used in terms of like data entry. You use it when you're telling something to multiply. You never use it as a symbol to represent
You would never write that out in an equation.
The multiplication sign. Or some mathematicians obviously get quite lazy, so you'll see in more advanced maths, you won't use the multiplication sign anymore.
You just place
put
them next to each other.
two characters next to each other. Or you'll use a dot. Very rare. It's very odd to use asterisks to represent multiplication when you're typesetting maths, which is what they're doing here. They're trying to show people what the formula is. They should just have them next to each other. I don't know why they've done. It's
because they don't know anything about math.
At the end of it, drawing in the cursor. Like it's not what you do in the written version of this communication, even though that's what you might do if you're typing it in.
It's literally the dumbest
somewhere.
shit ever.
You don't like a carriage return, cursor on the next line.
For now.
I switched from due dates to due dates.
The dumbest shit so far is what I should say.
Of my death.
Because they literally do something dumber than what I said last time.
I don't know. It's just weird. The whole thing.
Gnome Dome! Thank you for the $10, Gnome Domed. Middle class eliminated, rich get richer till the poor get educated. But you can't... Oh, that's Sage Francis? No shit, Gnome Domed. I talk to Sage Francis every once in a while on Facebook. Every once in a while, Sage Francis always likes all my comments because he's a good dude like that. But every once in a while, me and Sage Francis talk. I try to get Sage Francis to come on the podcast a couple times. Love me some Sage Francis. It's a great, great reference, my friend.
Reeks of mathsiness, which is where you can dress something up in the trappings of mathematics to make it look more legit, make it look more earned or worked out.
Yeah, if you're doing it for Trump supporters, it's pretty easy.
When what you may have done is just come up with an idea and then made it look more mathsy as a way to convince people you've put maybe more thought into it than you actually have. And it gets worse. I didn't just pick the values of phi as a quarter and epsilon as 4 at random. Those are the values the Trump administration used. And if you put them together...
So they just told you that epsilon was actually 0, right? Or less than 0, actually. Yet in their equation, it equals 4. In the equation. They tell you in the description that it is less than 0, but in the equation... they tell you it's 4. I really do feel like Donald Trump is targeting me personally now. I feel like he knows that the best way to get to me is by just doing really shitty math, specifically to do with grocery prices. I feel like he knows. I think he's watched my videos.
Together, guess what happens to 4 1/4? Boom! They're gone. That phi and epsilon cancel out. It's like they're not even in the equation. Turns out this
4 times 0.25 is 1. It literally cancels itself out.
Is just the trade deficit as a percentage of imports. That's it. It's that simple.
It's not. It doesn't even need to be there.
It's not applied consistently, and I know that because I looked up the data.
Of course, I wanted to check everything for myself, so I went onto the government website to get the exact import and export figures for every single country that was in those first 2 charts I put in the spreadsheet. And thankfully, each page for those countries, there's a section at the bottom which follows a very similar format. So I pasted all of those into a text document.
Yeah, Max. The fact that they're even saying that the company would eat 15 of the $20. So the percentage of your margin that would be eaten up by the tariff by itself is insane. No company is doing that. Maybe Costco. Costco might do it. But there's no way it's going to be 0.25. No consumer is going to pay 0.25. Sure, in a competitive market, some corporations will eat a certain percentage of the tariff, for sure. But that's going to be completely dependent on how competitive each market is, right? And once again, like I said, if they can take margin in other places, then they're going to potentially take more of the tariff hit. But they're going to use the markets that aren't affected by tariffs to raise prices, because this is how it works when you have a corporation that has shareholders. If they make $250,000 in profit per quarter and it goes to $195,000 per quarter, they lose shareholders. People say, oh, it's not going up. Fuck this shit. I'm out. That's how it works. So just like with eggs. So if you have a company right now, because like I said, the cost of eggs, for the most part, is pretty stable, right? It isn't like fluctuating super crazy like you've seen as far as grocery prices, the on-shelf egg prices cost, right? But the reason that those prices continue to go up is because if a grocery store sells 1,000 eggs normally, or 3,000, let's say they normally get 3,000 dozen per week, and they sell them for $1, then they make $3,000 per week from eggs regularly. Now, because of the bird flu, they only get 1,000 eggs per week. Do you think they only make $1,000 now? No. They triple the price to make sure that they still make $3,000 per week, because they must show growth to their shareholders. This is fucking, this is what drives me nuts about people talking about the price of eggs or the price of groceries. It's just like, you have to actually know something about what you're talking about. And when you talk about tariffs, you need to know something about what the fuck you're talking about. And Donald Trump doesn't know anything about tariffs except for that he thinks it's the most beautiful word. It's a beautiful word. Groceries? You might have never heard that word before. I did. It was amazing. Groceries. It's a beautiful word. It means a lot of things in a bag. Jesus Christ, we're so fucking cooked.
I could have done some kind of complicated scraping things, but for 50 entries, it was quicker to just do it manually.
Groceries.
Because the sentences had all been generated algorithmically from their data, they're all very,
you see what
very
this
similar.
dude is doing?
So I could use find
This is what you're supposed to do.
Bits and turn them into tabs, which meant that I could paste them into Excel.
You got some
a little bit of tidying up.
Congrats.
And there were 4 countries I couldn't find the data for, like Serbia and Tunisia.
Walmart's, a low
I then
margin
had
company.
all the data, official government data, from the same department as the equation for 46 of those countries. It means I can now go through here. This has got all the countries in the order they appear on
you need
those
to format those
charts.
E's.
It's got the 2 numbers that were printed on the chart. I then over here have the import amounts from 2024 in US dollars and the export amounts in US dollars. I can then work out the deficit fraction, which is the percentage we need to get it down by. And over here, I've then predicted what it should be based on their formula, and next to it is what's actually on the page. And if you have a look, a lot of these are very similar. But wait a minute, what's going on here? Negative 17 and 10. I'm going to reorder these and sort them by that deficit fraction from smallest to largest.
I wonder why. Because we have surpluses.
Here, these are the countries where the US is running a trade deficit. And as you can see down here, it matches perfectly. It's often off by 1%, but not always in the same direction. So there's some rounding going on.
Once again, though, these numbers are completely made up.
That's fine. But down here,
completely made up.
These are the runs where the US is running a trade surplus, not a deficit. And so this is where the US are getting more money in than they're sending out. And all of these...
Yes, because like I was just saying, you don't judge the health of a country's like tradability off of individual countries. You base it off the totality. Like in a grocery store, or let's just use a department to as an example. One department. We'll take the refrigerated department. In a refrigerated department, you're going to most of the time run what's called signpost items. Those are items that people generally remember the price for, right? So most people can remember something like up to 7 prices, and those are the things that they purchase all the time. So you want to keep, usually your egg prices, you want to keep your milk prices down, your egg prices down, your bread prices down. So in a dairy, you're keeping your milk and eggs. The reason you're keeping milk and egg prices down is because those are the prices when people go to other stores that they remember, and they'll remember, oh, it's more expensive at the store, or oh, it's cheaper. Now, to be able to do that, to be price competitive with other stores, most of the time you're going to run those products at either a loss leader or close to loss leader. Loss leader being something that you potentially lose money on or make very, very little off of. The way that you balance that out is by finding other items within the dairy that people will purchase that they will not specifically always know the price of. So let's take like a goat cheese, some kind of high-end goat cheese. You can make a higher percentage margin off that goat cheese because people come there to buy your milk. While they're there, they buy their expensive goat cheese. You never base what the health of a department or the country off of individual trade partnerships. The reason that when all these people say this shit, America's been abused, America, blah, 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 fucking all this dumb shit they say, that's not completely true. There are specific examples where that is true, but it is not as a whole true, because you don't base America's ability to trade and what we do and how healthy our country is off of individual trade agreements. We base it off of the totality of all the trade agreements. That's why you have a negative 260% deficit with someone like the United Arab Emirates, right? Like, you can't just fucking boil it down and reduce it to one trade agreement and go, look, Europe fucked us. That's why America's bad right now. It drives, I be here for an hour.
They should have, in theory, a negative tariff according to their equation, because if the goal is just to have a balanced budget, then they should make the imports artificially cheap to move it back to being balanced. But it's not even just that. There's always this default.
Thanks, Nathan.
This is so weird. So
I should have used produce.
They half them all. So over here, they're all half, but it doesn't go below 10%. So what's interesting is 17 halves to 10, 20 halves to 10, and then 30 halves to 15. And from then on, you get the halving effect. And that half amount is apparently here the USA discounted
just even the way he words
tariff.
things.
So I mean,
it's like signpost shit. It's what they'll remember.
Equals 4, phi equals a quarter. But they're numbers that have come out of nowhere. And then suddenly they just chuck in a factor of 2 or a half, depending on how you look at it. And like, why? Like,
and the reason when he says they're numbers that come out of nowhere, that's really important. Because those numbers literally came out of nowhere. Because the only way you would have numbers for the epsilon and for the phi is if you had done enough research on each individual country, their trade agreements, their imports, their exports, whether or not they have value-added taxes, whether or not they have tariffs already. You would need to, on every single one of those countries, come up with an individual number that would balance that out. There's no way you could come out with just some fucking round number and be like, oh, I can apply this universally to every one of these situations and it's going to come out correct. That's what I'm saying. They don't fucking know how to do math. There's no Big Balls is doing all the math for Donald Trump. Actually, it's ChatGPT. But Big Balls is using ChatGPT to do the math. They don't know how to do math.
Why?
Yeah, that's how I feel right now.
Let's talk trade deficits very briefly. So the word deficit sounds bad and the word surplus sounds good. And I guess that would be true if you're looking at like money you are earning as a person or a business.
Catastrophic.
But in terms of trade, they're just mathematical descriptions of the relative amounts of trade. There's no good or bad situation. A deficit can be good or bad.
Yes.
A surplus can be good or bad.
Yes.
It depends on all the details.
Once again, I'm going to use my grocery background here for you guys. So when it comes to waste, right? If you enter an apartment and let's say what your goal is between 3 and 5% waste, right? Now I come into your apartment. We'll use produce this time. I come into your apartment and your waste is 1% or 0.5%. Most people would understand that even though that's a really, really low number and you'd be like, dude, I got no waste at all. That means most likely you're leaving shitty produce on the shelf for people to purchase. Therefore, you're sending home customers with bad products. So lower waste numbers are actually bad. This is why you can't reduce things down to deficit good or surplus good, deficit bad. Because in this specific case, you want to have a certain percentage of waste because that means that people are properly getting rid of shitty product. There's also a such thing that's called capping profit versus capping sales. So you want to have enough backstock on hand at all times during periods of growth that when a person comes through the door, they're guaranteed that the product is on the shelf. That is called capping sales if you run out. If you run out of product, you have capped your sales. Now, if you keep too much backstock, then your overhead is too costly. That is called capping profit. That means that you have so much backstock that you can't make any profit because it's tied up in goods. There's no way that you can just boil down any of these things. And I'm talking about this on the most singular of levels. I'm reducing it all the way down to a grocery store. When you put that on the terms of an entire fucking country, you cannot just say deficits are bad, surplus is good. You're a moron if you do that. Because if you do not understand all the complicating factors that go along with those numbers and what makes them good or bad, then you don't have a fucking voice in this conversation. And Donald Trump doesn't know any fucking numbers. As that guy said, he's not really a numbers guy. He's more of an idea guy.
Of what is being imported and exported and the wider economy.
Am I being a substitute teacher up here? We've entered my area of expertise.
Well, primarily meat. Meat is the top import from New Zealand going into the US.
They've been doing this a long time.
Other animal products, eggs. Important to get some more eggs in the US.
Yeah.
And beverages, like wine.
So another good point there is he's saying, so if you tariff New Zealand, guess what happens to egg prices when they import their eggs to America? They go up. Even in fucking Trump's own equation, he has a 0.25, which is ridiculously low. That means that egg prices, a quarter of the tariff is going to be passed through on the egg prices.
So that's what is going from New Zealand to the US. What's going from the US to New Zealand? Well,
I love this
aircraft, spacecraft, machinery, nuclear reactors. It's a totally different type of trade, like completely different items. And now you stop and think, well, hang on, why is it important to import the same amount of wine as we export aircraft? Like, why should those two things be the same? You got to look at everything separately.
Not to mention, we're selling them the fucking aircraft. We're making money off of selling them the aircraft. It makes zero fucking sense to look at a place like New Zealand and be like, we sold you an F-35 for like $100 billion, and all you sold us, all you got us, you sold us like 30 dozen eggs, bro. Like, no shit. You know how many eggs you have to sell to make up for the price of an F-35? Like, this is what I'm saying. People would like fucking... Anyways, I'm going to stop
You might
now.
think, well, hang on, the wine imports make a difference to our local wine production. And maybe there are reasons to have tariffs to fine-tune your local wine production. Or maybe in terms of exporting
what Fan is saying
aircraft,
is what they're doing.
If
It
you
is
want to encourage
accelerationism. That's what they're doing.
US manufacturing, then that's good. You want to be selling more. I'm just saying, it's not as simple as surplus good, deficit bad. So in conclusion, these tariffs are being sold as reciprocal tariffs, but they're not. They're not reciprocal tariffs.
They're not reciprocal at all.
Need to balance trade. And that in itself is being sold separately. If you don't listen to what Trump said, but you read what was put on the website, that's been sold as good.
That's not what his supporters do.
US are being ripped off with all these deficits. We need to get it back to be neutral or a surplus. And that's not true either. So there's some reason that they want to put tariffs on every country, and they've come up with a sufficiently mathsy way to justify it. And finally, speaking of tax on the American people, we'll use their exact wording from their website. They talk about what the unweighted averages are across all the countries, and an unweighted average in this case is meaningless because you can't average percentages because they're percentages of different amounts of things. Has to be weighted. But they do tell us, weighted by imports, as it should be, the average across the entire globe is 41%. So that's the average tariff. And we know from their logic that whatever tariff you introduce, a quarter of that will be passed on to the consumer. Their numbers, their ratios, their everything, by saying the average increase in tariffs will be 41 percentage points, and a quarter of that, phi, the price pass-through, will go to the consumers. It means the Trump administration is saying that across all products imported into the US, from every other country across the globe, the cost to consumers for everything they buy will go up by 10.25%.
10.25. And here's the thing. That's an incredibly low number for a pass-through number. I've been a part of many businesses over the past 25 years. I can tell you this. The majority of places I have worked, they're going to pass a lot more than 0.25% or a quarter of the tariffs. They're going to pass, if not all of the tariffs, which would be a 41% increase in goods, they're gonna pass at least half that on to the consumer. So you're talking about 20.5%. Inflation at its highest during COVID, I think, was 18. I could be wrong about that, but I think it was 18. Over the past 5.5 years, we've seen grocery prices rise by, I believe it's 25% all in all. Over the last 5 years, 25% total prices on average across the board in grocery. So think of it this way. All of the grocery price increases that you have seen in the last 6 years, that on every item imported into America immediately, not over the next 5 years, like over the next 6 to 8 months. That's what those tariffs would do.
On average, that's everything. Some will be more, some will be less. Consumer spending is going to go up by over 10% on all imported products into the US. So, there you are.
Do you believe
and
Americans can
that's
afford
with their
higher
numbers.
prices because of tariffs?
They're not going to have higher prices. What's going to have, and who's going to have higher prices is China
lying.
and all of the countries that have been ripping us off for years.
Both those things are wrong. None of that's how that works. It's just funny that on one hand they say tariffs won't put prices up and they're going to combat inflation. On the flip side, they are saying everything's going to go up by 10.25%, including, from New Zealand, eggs. That's it. That's the video. Thanks for watching. If you're a regular viewer, please get in the comments and say something nice. We got to bounce.
Here, let me. I'm gonna put this in because you guys should share this with your MAGA friends. I know that they'll turn it off after 2 minutes. I know a minute 30 seconds is probably the all the attention span that they have. But this guy does a really good job. He's from New Zealand. He's not a fucking Trump hater, Trump supporter. The dude just does math. Okay. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, please like and subscribe and hit that notification bell and check out that video on the screen now.